The studio hall buzzed with noise, footsteps, voices, the constant shuffle of scripts. Outside, rain tapped lightly on the glass roof, and the smell of coffee mixed with the sound of rehearsed lines. It was the second day of auditions for Wednesday. Crew members hurried back and forth. Cameras blinked red, and every corner felt charged with tension and hope. Jenna Ortega sat quietly near the back wall, wrapped in a black hoodie, her script folded in half on her lap. She was already cast, Wednesday Addams herself, yet her stomach still felt tight, the way it used to before every audition. Fame hadn't erased that old memory of sitting in a cold room, waiting for someone to say your name. Across the hall, she noticed a girl sitting alone on a wooden bench, smaller than the rest, clutching her script like it was a lifeline. She couldn't have been older than 19. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. Every few seconds, she glanced toward the door where the assistant called out names, each one bringing her closer to panic. People around her laughed, joked, exchanged contacts. A room full of performers pretending not to be terrified. But this one wasn't pretending. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Jenna watched for a moment, then looked back at her phone, trying to focus on her own notes. But the image wouldn't leave her head. The shaking hands, the bitten lip, the same fear Jenna had felt years ago when no one knew her name. She sighed, stood up, and walked over. The girl didn't notice her until Jenna sat down beside her. "First audition?" Jenna asked softly. The girl turned, startled. "You're..." Jenna smiled before she could finish. "Yeah, but right now I'm just another person waiting in line." The girl laughed nervously. Her hands were still trembling. I think I'm going to mess it up." Jenna shook her head. "Then don't think. Just breathe. Want to run the scene together?" The girl blinked, as if she hadn't heard right. "With you?" Jenna nodded. "With me. It helps." And for the first time that morning, the room around them seemed to fade. No lights, no casting table, no pressure. Just two girls reading lines in a hallway that smelled like rain and coffee, one helping the other remember what it felt like to believe she belonged there. They started slowly, the girl stumbling over her lines at first, her voice small and unsure. Jenna didn't correct her. She just matched her rhythm, speaking softly, giving her space to breathe. When the girl forgot a line, Jenna filled in the pause with a look instead of words, guiding her without saying a thing. Little by little, the girl's tone began to shift. Her shoulders straightened, her hands relaxed, her words stopped shaking. She was no longer reciting, she was living the lines. It was subtle, fragile, but real. Jenna had seen hundreds of auditions, rehearsed with seasoned actors, worked with famous directors. Yet this, watching someone's fear meld away in real time, felt like the most honest performance she'd ever been part of. At one point, the girl laughed, half embarrassed, half relieved. "You're really good at this," she said. Jenna smiled. "So are you. You just forgot that for a second." They kept going until the assistant called another name from the door. The girl froze again, clutching her script. Her name was next. Jenna noticed the panic returning. That look of what if I fail? She leaned closer and said quietly, "When you walk in there, don't try to be perfect. Try to be real. They'll remember that." The girl nodded, her eyes glistening just a little. "And if they don't, then it's their loss," Jenna said, her tone calm and steady. "But I promise, you'll walk out proud." The assistant called her name again, louder this time. She stood, took a deep breath, and turned to go. Jenna gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "You've got this." And for the first time that morning, the girl didn't look like she wanted to run away. She looked like someone ready to be seen. The door to the audition room closed behind her with a soft click, and the hallway fell quiet again. Jenna sat back down, listening through the wall, faint voices, a laugh, then silence. That silence always meant everything. It could crush or lift you in a second. She remembered her own first big audition, a tiny room with peeling paint, her mom waiting outside holding her backpack. She'd been too nervous to look the casting director in the eye. Her hands had shaken so badly that she dropped the script halfway through. But she'd finished anyway. And when she walked out, someone had smiled at her and said, "You were brave." That one sentence had carried her for years. Now she sat there, older, successful, wearing a name everyone knew, yet somehow feeling the same ache in her chest, the same empathy. Fame hadn't built a wall around her. It had made her remember. Minutes passed. Jenna glanced at the clock. The girl had been inside longer than most. That was a good sign. Or maybe not. The waiting always lied. When the door finally opened, the girl stepped out slowly, her face pale at first. Then it broke into the smallest, purest smile. They laughed, she whispered, almost in disbelief. They actually laughed at my line. Jenna stood. That's good, right? The girl nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. They said I had something. I don't even know what that means. Jenna grinned. It means they saw you. The girl hugged her suddenly, quick, tight, grateful. Then she pulled away, embarrassed. I didn't mean, sorry, I just. It's okay, Jenna said softly. You did great. The assistant called another name. The world moved on. But for those few seconds, standing in a hallway that smelled of rain and nerves, Jenna knew this moment would stay. Because sometimes the best thing you can give another actor isn't advice or fame, it's presence. Just being there, quietly, when someone needs to remember that they're not alone. The auditions ended late that afternoon. The once busy hallway was now littered with coffee cups, wrinkled pages, and that strange mix of excitement and disappointment that always lingered after a long casting day. Jenna stayed behind, sitting near the same bench where they'd talked, scrolling through her phone, but her mind wasn't really there. She thought about the girl again, her trembling hands, her sudden confidence, that small, startled smile when she realized someone believed in her. There was something so familiar in it. Not her face, not her voice, but the feeling, that desperate hope of being good enough to belong in the room. A crew member walked by and said, "They're wrapping up. You can head out if you want." Jenna nodded, stood up, and adjusted her jacket. "Yeah, I'll go in a second." As she passed by the casting room, she heard muffled voices, laughter, then applause. It wasn't for her. It was for the last few actors reading for small parts. She smiled. There was a kind of poetry in it, in knowing that even the smallest roles mattered to someone more than anything else in the world. On her way out, she noticed the same girl again, now outside the studio, standing under an umbrella. The rain had started again, light but steady, blurring the city lights behind her. She was talking to someone on the phone, voice trembling, words spilling too fast. Jenna didn't mean to listen, but she caught a few fragments. "I think I did okay. No, I didn't freeze this time. Yes, she helped me. Her, can you believe that?" Jenna stopped for a second, hidden by the doorway. There was no need to say anything. No need to interrupt the moment. She just watched as the girl laughed through tears, clutching the phone like a piece of hope that might disappear if she let go. Then Jenna pulled her hood up, stepped out into the rain, and walked away quietly. The sound of the downpour drowning out everything except one soft truth echoing in her chest. Sometimes, the smallest kindnesses never get seen, but they're the ones that last the longest. The next morning, Jenna was back on set, black dress, braids, expression locked in that familiar, eerie calm that everyone now called the Wednesday face. Lights flared, cameras moved, and the director shouted cues. From the outside, everything looked perfectly controlled. But in Jenna's mind, flashes of the previous day lingered, the trembling girl, the hallway, the rain. Between takes, when makeup artists adjusted her collar or fixed stray hair, she caught herself wondering how the audition went. Did they call her back? Did someone notice what she could do when she finally stopped being scared? "Jenna, you're up," the assistant director called. She nodded, stepping onto the set, a dimly lit room filled with dusty furniture and that gothic charm that made the show what it was. The camera started rolling. Action. She delivered her lines, cold and deliberate, the way Wednesday would, a master of distance, detached but magnetic. Yet deep down, there was something new in her tone, a softness that didn't belong to the character, a quiet empathy hidden beneath all that precision. When the scene wrapped, the director smiled. That last take felt different, more human. "Keep that." Jenna just nodded. She knew exactly where it came from. At lunch, she sat alone on the edge of the set, eating half a sandwich and scrolling through messages. One stood out, from an unknown number. "Hi, it's me, the girl from the audition. I just wanted to say thank you again. I didn't get a call yet, but it doesn't even matter. You made me believe I could belong here. That's more than I ever expected." Jenna reread the message twice, smiling. Then she typed back, "You already do belong here. Trust me." She hesitated a moment, then pressed send. And for the rest of the day, Every time she stepped in front of the camera, that quiet warmth lingered beneath her performance, like a secret reminder that sometimes the best acting in the world starts with being real when no one's watching. A few days passed, and filming for Wednesday grew more intense. Long hours, complex scenes, endless retakes. Jenna barely had time to sleep, but every now and then, between setups, her mind drifted back to that girl from the audition room. She wondered if she'd ever hear from her again. Hollywood was full of near misses, people who brushed past their chance and disappeared into something quieter, smaller. It was cruel, how fast the city could forget someone who had everything but timing. One night, the crew wrapped late. The studio lights dimmed, leaving only the sound of rain tapping on the metal roof, the same kind of rain from that first day. Jenna stayed behind, sitting on the edge of the set, swinging her legs off a fake staircase that led nowhere. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I got the call. They want me for a small role. Just one scene, but it's real. Jenna smiled instantly. See, she typed back. They saw you. I told you they would. The reply came almost immediately. I was so scared that day. You didn't have to help me. No one else even looked at me. Jenna stared at the glowing screen for a while, thinking of how many times she had been that girl, invisible, shaking, praying someone would tell her she belonged. She typed slowly this time. Maybe I helped because I remember how it feels. You reminded me. A pause. Then 3 dots flickered at the bottom of the screen, the girl typing back. Do you think I'll ever get to be where you are? Jenna leaned back in her chair, reading the question again and again. Outside, thunder rolled softly. She thought of all the rooms she'd sat in, all the rejections that had felt final until they weren't. She thought of the auditions she'd left crying, of people who had said, not this time, and how each no had secretly been preparing her for a yes. If you keep doing it for the love, not the noise, she finally wrote, then yes. You already are. No reply came after that. The typing dots vanished. But Jenna didn't mind. She knew that silence. It was the silence of someone finally breathing easier. She slipped her phone into her pocket, walked to the window, and watched the rain slide down the glass like silver veins. The set behind her stood empty and still, frozen in its Gothic perfection. But for her, something small and quiet had shifted. Fame had given her millions of eyes watching. Kindness had given her one soul remembering. And that, somehow, felt bigger than all the lights in the studio. The next week brought new energy to the set. The buzz of the series growing. Interviews lining up, camera crews visiting to film behind-the-scenes segments. Everyone talked about schedules, ratings, the color of Wednesday's new costume, everything that shouted industry. Jenna moved through it all quietly, focused, grounded. But part of her stayed somewhere else, in that waiting room, in the silence between 2 actresses sharing lines that would never make it on screen. Halfway through the day, during a break, one of the producers stopped her. Hey, Jenna, he said, flipping through his notes. You remember that girl from the open call? The one you talked to before her audition? She turned, a bit surprised. Yeah, what about her? He grinned. We brought her back. Small recurring role. She's good, really natural. Director liked her energy. Jenna felt something warm bloom in her chest. She tried to keep her voice calm. That's great. Really great. She'll be here later this week for costume fitting, he added. Maybe say hi. I think she's a fan. Jenna nodded, but her mind had already wandered, back to the trembling hands, the quiet voice, the moment she'd said, don't be perfect, be real. It was strange, how something so small could ripple forward like this, a conversation turning into a future. That evening, when most of the crew had gone, she stayed behind again. The set was dim, lit only by the faint orange glow of work lights. It looked nothing like the spooky mansion on camera, just wood, wires, and painted walls. She sat on the floor, resting against one of the pillars, scrolling through messages, half exhausted. Then she opened Instagram, not her own, but the girl's page she'd quietly followed days ago. A new post, a blurry photo of the studio gate, captioned, "First real job. Still can't believe it." Jenna smiled, letting out a soft breath. There was no tag, no mention of her. The world didn't know the connection, and that made it perfect. She locked her phone, leaned her head back, and closed her eyes. Around her, the studio hummed quietly, empty, peaceful, alive with the echoes of every dream that had ever started in rooms just like this one. She whispered to herself, half a thought, half a truth. The best stories happen when no one's filming. 3 days later, the studio buzzed with that peculiar nervous energy that always came with a newcomer's first day. Wardrobe racks rolled across the floor, assistants whispered directions, someone was yelling about props. It was chaos, but the kind of chaos that smelled like creation, and Jenna loved it. She was in her trailer, reviewing lines for a scene with Enid, when there was a soft knock on the door. Her assistant poked his head in. "They're doing a camera test for one of the new roles," he said. "You might want to come by. Director said you'd recognize her." Jenna didn't need more explanation. By the time she reached the soundstage, her steps had quickened without her realizing. Inside, a small team of cinematographers adjusted lighting as a nervous figure stood on her mark. The girl was wearing her new costume, a crisp Nevermore Academy uniform that still looked too new, too stiff, as if it hadn't learned her shape yet. When she turned toward the light, Jenna saw the same eyes she remembered, uncertain, but burning. The same posture, trying to be small and strong at the same time. For a moment, Jenna just watched from the shadows. The director called out, "Okay, let's run that line again. Slower, less stagey. Think more truth, less performance." The girl nodded, took a deep breath, and started again. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. She hit the line, clear, genuine, alive. The room went quiet. Even the camera operator hesitated before cutting. "Perfect," the director said. "That's it." Applause scattered softly through the crew. It wasn't much, but it was real. That rare moment when everyone felt something shift, something honest. Jenna smiled from the back, unseen. She didn't need to interrupt. She didn't even want to. She just watched as the girl looked around, wide-eyed, realizing she had done it, that she was in. Only when the girl stepped away from the set did Jenna walk over, slow and quiet. The girl turned, startled. Her face lit up instantly. I didn't know you'd be here." Jenna grinned. "You didn't think I'd miss your first scene, did you?" The girl shook her head, almost laughing. "I still don't believe this is real." Jenna handed her a bottle of water. "That's how you know it matters." They stood there for a while, the noise of the set swirling around them, lights buzzing, grips shouting, cables dragging. But in that moment, it felt like everything else faded out. The girl whispered, "When you helped me that day, I thought you were just being nice." Jenna shrugged, smiling. "Maybe I was. But look where it got us." The girl laughed quietly, the sound breaking through the studio hum. "I hope one day I can do that for someone else." Jenna looked at her, proud but calm, and said, "You already did. You just don't know it yet." The cameras started setting up again, and the director called for a reset. The girl hurried back to her mark. Jenna stepped aside, out of frame, into the dim edge of the set, watching as the lights rose and the scene began. And for the first time since Wednesday had started filming, she didn't feel like the star. She felt like the witness to something that mattered even more. The episode they were filming that week wasn't one of the big ones. No elaborate choreography, no stunt doubles, no expensive effects. Just a few dialogue-heavy classroom scenes, the kind most viewers would forget by the next episode. But to Jenna, it felt different now. Because for the first time, she wasn't just sharing the set with a new actor. She was sharing it with her. The girl from the audition room. The same one who once couldn't even say her lines out loud. The director adjusted a light and called out, "All right, let's take it from the top. Jenna, you start." Then we panned to Sophie. Sophie, that was her name. Jenna smiled faintly, hearing it in a professional tone, like it finally belonged here. They rolled cameras. Jenna delivered her lines smoothly, sharp and cold like Wednesday. Then the focus shifted to Sophie. At first, her voice was thin, barely above a whisper. But as she continued, something clicked. Her eyes steadied, her timing sharpened, and suddenly she wasn't the nervous girl from the hallway. She was her character, alive and believable. "Cut," the director shouted. "That was solid. Let's go again, same energy." Jenna turned her head slightly, catching Sophie's glance between takes. Sophie smiled, almost shyly, like she couldn't believe they were standing here together, one leading, one learning. During the lunch break, they sat together on the steps outside the soundstage, eating from paper boxes. The sun was high, and the air smelled faintly of sawdust and fake fog from the set. "You were good today," Jenna said, sipping her coffee. Sophie laughed nervously. I was terrified. That's normal, Jenna replied. If you're not scared, it means it doesn't matter to you. Sophie looked down at her food, then said quietly, You know what's funny? I used to think people like you were untouchable. Like, you're on some different level. Jenna smirked. I'm not. I just started being scared earlier than you. They both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from honesty, not humor. When the break ended, the crew called them back inside. The soundstage looked different now, brighter somehow, warmer. The director clapped his hands. All right, let's make some magic. As the cameras rolled again, Jenna watched Sophie hit her marks perfectly, her voice steady, her face alive with confidence. It was subtle, but it was there. That transformation, that moment when someone stopped pretending and simply became. And Jenna, standing beside her under the same lights, realized that the best part of the job wasn't always being in front of the camera. Sometimes, it was watching someone else finally find their light. A few weeks later, Wednesday was deep into production. The rhythm of shooting had settled into that familiar cycle. Early call times, long days, quick meals, and late-night rewrites. Most of the cast floated through it like a machine. But for Jenna, there was one thing that made the grind different now. Seeing Sophie grow a little more confident every single day. It wasn't just acting anymore. Sophie had started belonging. She joked with the crew, stayed late to rehearse scenes, asked the lighting team how things worked. The timid girl from the hallway had turned into someone who laughed out loud, who walked with purpose, who didn't shrink when people looked at her. One afternoon, between takes, the director pulled Jenna aside. You know that new girl? Jenna smiled. Sophie, yeah, she's got something special. Reminds me of you, actually. Jenna laughed lightly. That's dangerous. One of me is enough. The director grinned. Maybe, but I think she's going places. Keep an eye on her. She looks up to you. Jenna didn't answer right away. She glanced over toward the set, where Sophie was sitting on a prop desk, laughing with one of the makeup artists. The light caught her just right. Not staged, not dramatic, just honest. That evening, when the day wrapped, Jenna stayed behind as the crew packed up. Sophie was still there, folding her costume into a garment bag with careful hands. You did really well today, Jenna said, leaning against the table. Sophie turned, a little surprised. You think so? I kept messing up that one line. Jenna shook her head. That's not what people remember. They remember how real you were. Sophie smiled, brushing hair from her face. You make it sound easy. It's not, Jenna said softly. But you make it look like it is. There was a small pause, that quiet space between two people who understood each other without needing to say much. The studio lights above them flickered, one by one, as the crew shut down for the night. Sophie broke the silence. You know, that day in the audition room, I almost walked out. Jenna tilted her head. Why didn't you? Sophie looked up at her and smiled faintly. Because you sat down. Jenna felt her throat tighten just a bit. She looked away, pretending to check her phone. Guess it was a good seat. Sophie laughed, and the sound filled the empty room. Light, alive, the kind of laugh that stays in your head long after it fades. As Jenna left the studio, she realized something simple and true. Sometimes, the real success isn't landing the role. It's helping someone else believe they deserve to stand beside you in the light. Filming moved into its final stretch. The big sets were being torn down one by one, the sound stages growing emptier every day. The crew had already started talking about wrap parties and next projects, that bittersweet moment when a story ends and everyone begins to drift back into their own lives. For Jenna, it was strange. Wednesday had been the most intense thing she'd ever done, and yet, when she thought about the moments that would stay with her forever, it wasn't the premiere, the costumes, or even the applause. It was that small hallway weeks ago, the trembling girl with the wrinkled script. Now that girl was standing on the same set as her, camera ready, hitting her marks like a pro. The difference was night and day. One evening after a long shoot, the cast gathered around for the final classroom scene. It wasn't anything grand, just a few lines, a bell ringing, the usual end-of-day moment in Nevermore Academy. But everyone knew it was their last time together in that room. When the director called cut, people cheered and hugged. Crew members clapped. Props fell over. Someone brought cupcakes. Sophie stood to the side at first, smiling but keeping quiet. Jenna noticed. She walked over, still in her costume, braids perfectly neat, expression still half in character. You're not celebrating? Sophie laughed softly. I don't even know what to say. All of this feels like a dream. I keep waiting for someone to tell me I don't belong here. Jenna shook her head. That's what every real artist feels. The trick is, you stay anyway. Sophie looked at her, eyes glistening. You know, that day you helped me. I went home and told my mom I met you. She thought I was making it up. She still doesn't believe it happened. Jenna smiled. Maybe don't prove her wrong just yet. Let her think it was a movie moment. They both laughed, but then Sophie's voice softened. I think about it a lot. How different my life would have been if you hadn't said hi that day. Jenna leaned back against a desk, crossing her arms. You'd have found your way eventually. People like you always do. You just needed a nudge. Sophie studied her for a moment, then said quietly, No, I needed you. The words hung there, not dramatic, not forced, just honest. The kind of truth that lands gently but stays forever. Jenna didn't know what to say. She just smiled, the tired kind of smile that comes after long days and quiet victories. Then promise me something, she finally said. Sophie nodded. Anything. When someone else sits in that audition hallway one day, shaking like you did, you'll sit beside them. Sophie's eyes widened a little, and then she nodded again, this time firmly. I will. They stood there in silence for a few seconds, two actresses, one beginning, one still learning what it meant to lead. Around them, the crew packed up props and coiled cables, laughter echoing through the fading set. And in that noise, Jenna realized something simple but profound. The truest legacy wasn't fame, or awards, or even performance. It was kindness passed forward, invisible but unstoppable. The cameras might have stopped rolling, but that was the scene that would last longest. A month later, Wednesday officially wrapped. The sets were gone, the props stored away, and the studio lot that once buzzed with hundreds of people now stood quiet. Just the wind carrying echoes of dialogue no one would ever say again. Jenna had moved on to press tours and talk shows, smiling under bright lights, answering the same questions about how it felt to play Wednesday Addams. Cameras flashed, hosts laughed, and audiences clapped. But even in those polished moments, part of her mind kept drifting back to one particular day, one particular hallway, and one particular girl. One evening, in a hotel room far from home, she opened her phone to unwind. Notifications poured in, interviews, edits, clips from fan pages. She scrolled absently until she stopped on a tagged photo. It was Sophie, standing on a small set, holding a script, the caption reading, Day 1 on my new series. I still remember who told me to believe. Jenna smiled, that real kind of smile that doesn't reach the red carpets, the one that belongs only to quiet victories. She typed a comment, paused, then deleted it. Some moments didn't need signatures. She turned off her phone and sat by the window. Below her, the city glowed, thousands of windows flickering like scenes in progress. Somewhere out there, someone was sitting in another waiting room, hands shaking, heart racing, wondering if they belonged. Jenna leaned her head against the glass and whispered, Just breathe. You will. For the first time in weeks, she felt calm. The fame, the interviews, the flashing lights, they were all noise. But this small ripple she'd started without planning to, this was something real. Because in a world obsessed with being seen, she had learned something simple and rare. The brightest kind of light doesn't come from the spotlight. It comes from helping someone else find theirs.